Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm the moderator for the service in my recovery workshop today. Please keep your microphone muted as we open the meeting with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Our speakers today are Michelle from Minnesota and George. And George, I'm not sure where you're from, but I'm sure we'll find out after a bit. Today we are talking about tradition and concept number 12. Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of these traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Principle behind Tradition 12 is spirituality. The concept we're going to be listening and studying is Concept 12, and it reads, the spiritual foundation for OA service ensures that A, no OA committee or service body shall ever become the seat of perilous wealth or power. B, sufficient operating funds plus an ample reserve shall be OA's prudent financial principle. C, no OA member shall ever be placed in a position of unqualified authority. D, all important decisions shall be reached by discussion, vote, and whenever possible by substantial unanimity. E, no service action shall ever be personally punitive or an incitement to public controversy. And F, no OA service committee or service board shall ever perform any acts of government, and each shall always remain democratic in thought and action. So those are our two topics. The principle behind Concept 12 is respect. The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions of Overeaters Anonymous and the pamphlet, The 12 Concepts of OA Service, are great resources for more information about the traditions and concepts, and are available in the OA bookstore, which can be found on the OA website, oa.org. To stay in harmony with Traditions 6 and 10, we ask that speakers and members who share mention only OA-approved literature. After each speaker, there will be time for sharing. This workshop is being recorded and will be posted on the OA website podcast page, as well as other podcast feeds like iTunes. If you speak, it is considered implied consent to have your voice and your share recorded and posted. To preserve your anonymity, please use only your first name or a fictitious name when you share. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. Please use special workshop meeting number 82278 when making your contribution. Go to oa.org and click on contributions. Donations may also be mailed to the World Service Office, Post Office Box 44020, Rio Rancho, New Mexico, 87174-4020, and that address is also available online. If you have any questions regarding contributions, you may also contact the World Service Office at 505-891-2664. Thank you for helping us to carry the message. And so I would like to introduce our speaker, Michelle, and she will be speaking on Concept 12. So go ahead, Michelle, and share your story with us.
Okay. Hi, my name's Michelle, and I'm an abstinent-compulsive overeater, and as Cindy said, I'm in southern Minnesota. I am grateful for this opportunity to do service today, too, so I'm grateful that I was asked. To qualify a little bit, I've been blessed with over a 170-pound weight release from over the last 15 years, and that was during 2 abstinent pregnancies. As many of us do, we come into a program to lose weight, and truly I was no different. I didn't know how this program would transform my life. I hear a lot of times in program, we come in for the vanity and we stay for the sanity. I truly am here to remain and keep my sanity. Yes, I do not ever wish to refine my weight, but I truly want to stay as sane as possible. I really didn't realize how little of a real life I had. I was so immersed in the food all of the time. I constantly had food in my mouth. And when I didn't, I was still obsessed with what I was going to eat the next time that I was even hungry. And basically, when I wasn't binging, I was planning my next binge. I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted it right now. It didn't matter what I had to do to get what I wanted. It was no different than a drug addict and wanting to get my next fix. I became a master manipulator at just trying to get anything that I needed. Qualify a little more, I also did a lot of abnormal things with food that the typical eater doesn't do. I hid my food in my room. I stole money from my parents, and I would buy junk food at a convenience store because we didn't have any junk food in our house. I would do things like turn the faucet on at night, and when I sneak out in the kitchen, I'd turn the faucet on so that my parents couldn't hear the crumpling of a pretzel bag being open. I would do things like drink Diet Pepsi, but then I'd be sitting there with some obscene amount of food, like that's really going to cancel out the amount of food I was eating. But I thought if I was drinking a Diet Pepsi, it looked like it was normal. I would do things like eat out of an ice cream box, and I would eat all the way through, maybe halfway, three-quarters of the way the other side, and then I'd flip it around and put it back in the freezer. Like, seriously, people wouldn't think that once they get to the other side, they're not going to notice that somebody else is eating it. That's just how insane my thinking was. I do things like when I'd sit on a chair or on a couch, I would sit with a pillow in front of me like that was going to hide how heavy I was. And I was about, my highest weight that I was known to be was about 334, but I know I had to be at least 350 pounds by the time I was at my top weight. I would do things like I worked in a restaurant, and when we clear tables, I'd take food off the table, or not off the table, off of the tray as we bring it back if it looked like it wasn't uneaten. Insane things that other people just don't do. I can say for me that I have eaten my lifetime share of popcorn and ice cream and pretzels and tons of other things that for today just are not a part of my food plan. And it's such a relief. I can still remember when I met my first sponsor and when she described how she no longer obsessed about the food. And I swear I looked at her like she had three heads. I didn't know that was even possible. I mean, I literally must have sat there with my jaw open. I didn't think that was even something that somebody knew how to do. I didn't understand it. I knew I wanted what she had. You could just see it in her. She had a peace and a serenity about her. She just had a calm spirit. And the fact that she said that she didn't obsess about food, I wanted to know more. I wanted to do what she was doing. And what did I do? I mean, basically I did what she said. And what her sponsor had told her and her sponsor's sponsor was basically, following her experience and her strength and hope, and I followed her suggestions. And everything was a suggestion. It wasn't something I was told to do, because had it been, I probably would have run right out the door. The things she told me were to work the steps to the best of my ability, attend 3 meetings a week, weigh and measure my food, call her daily to commit my food. The one thing she did say was to eat 3 meals a day with nothing in between, and my jaw dropped again, like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? I've never done that. I've never had a beginning and an end to my food. But she asked if I could just do it for today, and I did. And then I did it for the next day, and on it went. And you know what? It worked. And for me, the weight literally fell off. I mean, I didn't exercise any of my weight off. I was very blessed. And as I said before, I had 2 abstinent pregnancies during this time. So that just tells you exactly how much I had been eating. But then I realized there's much more to the OA program than just losing weight. And there was this thing called service. My sponsor got me involved right away. She just sponsored me right into service. And it was something as simple as setting out literature each week, and then something like becoming group secretary. Just very simple things, but just continually nudging me along to do something to help our group. I would help plan idea day and just different things like that. Even she had me signing up to be a sponsor, I would say, within the first 3-4 months. And although I was scared, and I'm very grateful that nobody wanted to be sponsored right away, it gave me a chance to get used to things. But I did what she said. I was willing to go to any length with what she asked me to do. All this just led to moving beyond the group level. And then I started to attend intergroup. But what I found with that was I really honestly thought that intergroup meetings were business meetings. Somebody told me they were business meetings, and when I think of business, I think of money and budget type of things. And I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do with something like that? I don't have any background on that. But when I got there, I realized it had pretty much not very much to do with that. And I became aware of all the other service things that go on within our organization, the committees, the different service positions, and some of the business of our program, and how we're there to carry the message to other suffering compulsive overeaters. And then it just happened. Suddenly, I am surrounded by all these people that are abstinent members who are already carrying the message. I hadn't had that experience in my home group. I had to go outside of my home group to meet other abstinent people. And they all had this passion about them that I heard, and I was drawn to that passion. I mean, I had no idea what it required to keep OA alive, but in getting involved and immersed myself deeper into my own program and my own personal recovery, and I found out, the more that I gave, the more I got back. There was like a high that came from that for me. There was such an adrenaline rush I got from it, and it kept me out of the food. And the result of that, my program got much stronger. And it all started with intergroup, again, taking on some not-so-scary service position of corresponding secretary where, it was just my job to send out information that other groups hadn't attended the meeting, and business or just simple office things like that. And then my sponsor had always recommended to me that I was to say yes to any service. And every role that I've ever taken on, there was always someone that had been there before me was willing to help me with it. And I never felt alone that way. And the more I did service, the more enthusiasm I began to get for program. And I had a bigger desire to be around abstinent people. The more I was around them, the more I wanted to be around them. And as I said, my home meeting didn't have any abstinent members, so I had to go out of my area. I had to drive 45 minutes to find that experience and be around it. And I'm grateful that I was willing to do that, because I don't like to drive a long distance. And I began to gain more hope than the longer that I spent with these people. And I can vividly remember one of my biggest spiritual experiences in regards to service and the impact that it brought to me and my personal recovery. I can remember a region and world service rep had just returned from the business conference in New Mexico, and she was sharing her experience. And she just literally oozed with passion and enthusiasm for program, and I wanted what she had. I didn't want her position that she had, but I wanted what she had. It just came out of her, and it was so exciting. And I can distinctly remember her describing, I want to say it was some motion they were voting on, and how intense and strong and passionate all these people were, and having different opinions and their personality and the tension that rose. But the message that I heard was that of respect of one another. And although it was like this heated, passionate debate, every time she talked about it, she just talked about the humility and the respect each of them had for one another. Like there was nobody that was above one another on that, that ladder of worth, or they treated one another as equals, and they would agree to disagree. And I didn't even know that people could do that in all the business areas or work life that I've ever had. I didn't even know that it existed, and that really made a huge impact on me besides her passion. And then I began myself to witness this over and over again throughout my years in service. I mean, this fellowship uses the steps to guide our personal recovery, and I'm so grateful for that. The traditions, they assist us in guiding the health of our group meetings. And honestly, in the beginning, that was hard for me. I didn't want to hear the traditions, but the more I came immersed in service, the more I realized how fundamental they are to keeping our programs safe for us. And then the concepts, which in the beginning, many of us don't even have a clue what the concepts are. And they define and guide the practices of our service structures that conduct the business of OA. Cindy already read about Concept 12, and it's the spiritual foundation for our OA service. And I'm not going to go through the long what it states, but, we're all members of the same fellowship, and we share the same compulsion with food. We all want what's best for OA as a whole, and this program teaches us that we're all equal. We might have different opinions. I've learned that the spiritual principles of respect in a way that I hadn't even realized. The more I did service at different levels of OA, and as we become trusted servants for different committees, all those other spiritual principles that are embodied in the 12th concept came to light too. I mean, there's it's not just respect, there's selflessness, realism, dialogue, representation, compassion. There's just a bunch of different things that meld together in concept 12. And, we as trusted servants, we don't have any status. We don't govern. All the decisions that we make are based on what the members that we are representing as a whole, as we come together in a group conscience. And, most of us begin to develop more of our spirituality as we begin to rely more and more on our higher power when we're working our programs and coming together. And the connection to our higher power becomes stronger because we need to rely on him more to make those decisions. And then we begin to lose the desire for that prestige that some people look for in other areas of their lives. And selfishness begins to disappear, like it talks about in the promises. And we become more humble and compassionate. And I did to a certain degree. But for me, when I began working past the intergroup level and became one of the region and world service reps, those positions that terrified me, my own defects began to rise. And my passion and my enthusiasm took on a life of its own. And although I always had the best intentions, I wanted to give back all that was freely given to me and make a difference. I dove in head first, and I hit the ground running. And I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. There was just, like I said, there was just this vitality about it, this passion about it. I wanted to shout it off the rooftops. I wanted everybody to know it, and I wanted everybody to come along. But I started to realize that it was taking on a life of its own. And the more I felt good, the more I did. And the more alive I felt, which was great, but was it really? It was and it wasn't. And it was wonderful that I finally felt like I belonged to something and that mattered, and I had a vested interest. But at the same time, in the past, I'd never felt a part of anything in my life prior to program, but not even my own family. I felt loved and understood and validated, and it boosted my self-esteem when I was a part of doing service. And once an addict, always an addict, you hear, I kind of became a service junkie of sorts because I felt so alive. I took on more and more, and there was such a rush of an excitement. It was no different than when I was in the food. I just couldn't stop. And even when I knew I should or I was overdoing it, I've always been such a volume person. And as you know, you can never fill a void like that with anything because there's never enough. Fill in the blank. It could be food, drugs, alcohol, whatever, even service. You can do anything to an extreme. And when that happened, I began to hit a bottom. But as with other things in my life, I had to experience a lot of pain and discomfort over and over again before God got through to me. And God was trying to get through to me, but the adrenaline was so strong I couldn't hear him. And I thought I should do all that I was doing. And when God finally got through to me, when I finally got honest with myself and my sponsor, my God, which I would call my God with skin on, I was finally able to realize what was going on. However, as long as I kept putting one step in front of the other, I kept coming back and working my food plan, calling my sponsor, working the steps daily, and putting God first in all my affairs, then I'd have a chance. I had a lot of different types of bottoms through my 15 years in recovery, and each time it brings me closer to God of my understanding and my spirituality grows. One of the amazing gifts that I've found in this program is the more that I let God remove my defects, the more my spirituality grows. And each new behavior that I learn, I get to practice within these OA rooms. And the more self-confident I become, and I'm able to practice all of these principles in all my affairs. It taught me to treat everyone with respect and dignity, and most importantly, myself. We're all children of God, and uniquely and divinely made is truly what I believe. And it's quite the gift that we're given. So I was to come up with a couple of questions, and my questions to you are, how has the principle of respect affect your service work, and how does the principle of respect transfer into your daily life? Thank you again for this opportunity, and thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you very, very, very much. Just as a reminder, this workshop is being recorded and will be posted on the OA website. If you speak, it is considered implied consent to have your voice and your share recorded and posted. Please use only your first name or a fictitious name to preserve your anonymity. The workshop is now open for sharing. So if there's someone who would like to share, and we're open for some sharing now.
Hi, I'm Marcy. I'm a grateful, recovering compulsive overeater. And thank you very much, Michelle, for your service. It was a very inspiring story, and it really spoke to me a lot. And anyway, but I want to talk about respect. I was out of rooms for 8 years. I came back last August, and during those 8 years, I was in a deep depression, and all I cared about was food and smoking and stuff. And I was horrible to live with. I was a miserable person. I didn't treat anybody with respect, including myself. And my fiance put up with me, thank God. He's been living with me for 9 years, but he said use me, and I took advantage of him. And I was like, okay, I let him do everything for me. I wouldn't get up my big butt to do anything for myself. I was just like so self-absorbed and depressed and stuff, and I became so dependent on him instead of on God. Then when I came back last year, I started doing things more for myself as my recovery grew and stuff. And so I have a much happier life now, much more peace and serenity. I'm much easier to live with and to get along with and stuff. Not always, but I still have my moments and stuff, but at least I feel my feelings, and I try not to get over it. I've been struggling a little bit with the food lately, but I'm getting back on track, thank the Lord, good one day at a time. And also about respect, also when I was into the food, I was in relapse. My boyfriend and I used to, I can't believe this. I'm such a hypocrite. But my boyfriend, my fiance, and I used to make fun of other fat people. I'd say, look at him. How much does he eat? How big is his sandwich and stuff? And am I bigger than him? Is he bigger than me? Is she bigger than me? And it was just really terrible. And now when I see people who are overweight, I just look at them and I feel bad for them. I pray for them and stuff. And I just try to live like by an example. And so I have much more respect for the people around me. I can walk around my neighborhood in the store and stuff and smile at people or say hello, and I carry on a normal conversation most of the time. And so it's just a much better way to live. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you, Marcy. Would someone else care to share?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a compulsive overeater.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Thank you so much for your share. It really gave me an opportunity to reflect on my service and on how I show up in groups and how I show up individually with respect. And the principles are so important for me, and they really do help me live my life. And a large chunk of what I do is working in meetings and groups. And I was privileged to do service at the intergroup and the region level, and I really could so relate to your share on that. Is I was amazed at what I had seen, listening to discussions and watching all of the principles and concepts at work. But what I think when I see respect is that's what I really picked up at that time was really understanding how important it was and how freeing it made being in an environment that had the potential to be difficult to be so pleasant. And I took that into what I did and what I still do. And using respect, for me, has been so critical for my program, because if I'm respectful of others, I also am respectful of myself. And that was something I never was before program. I didn't respect myself because I didn't love myself. So it was taking those principles and using them in all of my life and all of my affairs. For me, it continues to be something that helps me live a life that is so much richer, respecting others' opinions, respecting others that they are who they are. Just wanted to share that. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there anyone else who would like to share on the topic? This is Cindy, and I'd like to add just a little tiny thing. Respect is such an important part of our program, because I was used to being told, sit down, shut up, we don't need your opinion, in my own personal life. Not so much by the time I got to OA, but it was something that had happened to me over and over and over in my childhood and in my when I was a young person. And so to be respected, to be allowed to voice my opinion. People these days would say, what do you mean? You were never that way. You were always like you are now, because now I'm not afraid to give my opinion. And sometimes I have to work on the respect of allowing others to have their opinion. And so that's a new challenge. I'm very organized, I'm very focused, and so when things don't move at my pace, I kind of say, let me just show you how to do this. And I had a friend remind me not too long ago, the job will get done whether they do it your way or they do it their way. So why don't you let them do it their way? And so I continue to try and practice that. Being in a program and just being around other people who are kind and loving has taught me a lot of self-respect, and doing service has really worked on those rough edges that need to help me learn how to be respectful. I can disagree with you, and I can still be respectful of you. And so that's what I've learned in program a great deal in the last 26 years. And so with that, I'll pass. Would anyone else like to share? We have just another minute or so.
This is Bob, St. Louis, compulsive overeater. And you know what I've had shown to me time and time again, under traditional management models, how our fellowship functions, in a worldwide venue is illogical, because control and domination and whatever are part of the typical any organization I've ever been a part of. And what's neat is here they tell me, first of all, that we don't talk down to anyone. And the whole idea of this model, I think, is to bring people into a sense of ownership over the affairs of our fellowship. If in a group, and that looked like just something where those people participated, and why do they, begs the question, why do they do this or why do they do that? There wouldn't be that sense of ownership, and I think that's so crucial when we're everyone's opinion gets respected and indeed encouraged today. And I think that's what I've seen this upside down. AA calls it the upside down triangle. That this is truly, while we pay lip service to it, I think in our other affairs in life and politics, I think we really, by practicing this concept, I think we really do try to put it in action here. That we are really governed from the bottom up. The bottom is the top. That's why I've come to learn over the years to get everyone involved as soon as possible in their recovery. I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Please remember that we are self-supporting through our own contributions. Please use special workshop meeting number 82278 when making your contribution. The World Service Office needs our support to continue to serve our fellowship. Go to www.oa.org and click on contributions if you want to make a contribution that way. You can also mail in a contribution. Thank you for helping us to carry the message. I would like to welcome our second speaker, George, and he is going to speak to us on the Tradition 12, which is anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all these traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And with that, I will turn it over to George.
Thank you very much, Cindy and Michelle, for the previous share. That was really, really helpful to me, actually. So my name is George, and I'm a compulsive overeater. I also sometimes like to say I'm a food addict. There are, of course, that comes with certain selections. There are some foods I find more addicting than others, and thankfully, my higher power has given me a certain number of foods that I don't like enough to really want to compulsively overeat. So if there's a time in my plan of eating where, gee, I'm hungry and my energy's dropping through the floor, and I'm can't quite make it to the next meal, there are certain vegetables I can lean on when they're raw to get me through. Because when I think about binging on them, it just doesn't make any sense. It has never been something I liked. But there are other times when I look at any food, and some of those foods are, because I have a family, some of those foods are still out and about in my house. There are times when those foods are out in the open and I walk past them, I sometimes think, well, I feel as though I'm in solid recovery and I feel like my spirituality is very solid. But could I eat that food and finish it now, right here? And I go, yeah, I could. And that's why, even though I've been in the rooms and consistently in the rooms for over 7.5 years now, I still need my higher power. I still need that reinforcement on a daily basis in order to stay in touch with my abstinence, and I'm really grateful for that. Like I said, I've been in the rooms for about 7.5 years. My rough weight loss that I maintain is about 60 pounds. I often say that it took me about 20 years to do step one because I first learned about OA in my early 20s. Now I'm eternally grateful to the wife of a friend of mine who told me about OA. And at the time, I'm not sure I was necessarily obviously a compulsive overeater. I certainly had many food behaviors that were not very helpful. I always had, odd things that I did with food, how I ate food and how certain behaviors I would engage in order to not have people see me eat food. It was one thing to sit down and eat a meal, but I wanted more food than I would get from 3 meals a day. And that meant that at night, if I wanted to eat and I didn't want anybody seeing me eat, that meant everybody else had to go to bed, because then I could get up after everybody was in bed and then go downstairs and start eating. That wasn't really a very good plan with respect to harmony within my family. I would get anxious about people going to bed early enough. I'd be pushing them off to bed, trying to get my wife in bed earlier so that I could get up and eat. It also led to other odd things like, I didn't want anybody else to know how much fast food I ate, especially on the way home before dinner. So I would have a whole bunch of fast food wrappers typically stuffed underneath my car seat. And when I got home, at some point in the evening, depending on what had happened that day, my wife might offer and say, hey, you want me to put your car away for you? And I would leap, get really anxious, because the thought of her seeing all the wrappers of crappy food underneath my seat when she moved my car, I thought she had no idea that I was a food addict. And of course she knew. And the worst thing, I think, was that I would spend pretty much every day fighting with food in my mind. The way I would fight it was I would have a certain concept for a diet that day, or even just a concept of how much food can I get away with eating today. Oftentimes I'd start out in the morning with this intention of, today would be the day I would solve my food problem. Today would be the day that I would conquer my food. And oftentimes 15 minutes later, I'd be eating again and eating the same old crap that I had vowed I wouldn't eat. And that would take place, that battle would take place in my brain all day long. I'd stop and say, okay, well, how much can I get away with now? Well, how much can I get away with now? And 20 minutes later, how much can I get away with now? And essentially what it meant was that pretty much all day I was thinking about food and how much I could eat. But I didn't know it. I didn't understand that that's what was going on. And then about a year and a half before I came into the rooms, I learned about fasting. And here I thought was the ultimate control over food. I could just not eat. What I learned from fasting was that instead of being something that would enhance my spirituality by not having this fight over food all day, instead of that, what I found was that pretty much all day I thought about, well, gee, I'm not feeling wonderful about what's happening in my life. Maybe food can solve that problem. And I would continuously find myself standing in front of the refrigerator with the open door saying, wait, this is a fasting day. Why am I standing here? Or I'd be over in front of the cupboard and say, wait, today's a non-food day. How come I'm thinking about food again? And that would go on and on. Ultimately, what happened was my fasting got to the point where I couldn't anymore. I'd lost complete control of my food, and I was, instead of fasting once a week, which was the plan I had, sort of a diet thing, instead of doing that, I was just continuously eating all day. I got to the point where over the course of 4 months, I had put on over 30 pounds. And I knew then that there really was no end in sight for me. There was nothing I could do about the food. I couldn't control it at all. I really was powerless over it. The way I got lucky was that I had sort of accidentally brainwashed myself into knowing that the 12 steps would work for me. All I had to do was put together this knowledge that OA existed, which had been given to me 20 years earlier, and the understanding that I was powerless. And with that, I made a commitment to go to meetings. The first meeting I tried to get to, unfortunately, had moved 2 weeks prior, and I had not seen the update online. So at the very first meeting I tried to go to, nobody was there, at least nobody from OA. And then I learned later that they had moved and went to that meeting the following week. But I think it was good because the next day I went to my first meeting, and that was a really great meeting because I finally heard somebody else talk about food the way I had heard my mind talk about food since as long as I could remember. And it shocked me that somebody could actually say that out in the open in a room with other people in it. That's really when I knew that I was home. I didn't have to go anywhere, and I really belonged in the rooms. Thankfully, since then, my action plan involves trying to get, doesn't always happen, but trying to get to 5 meetings a week. I'm lucky in that I don't need a job today. My wife's a physician, so that gives me a little bit of flexibility. But it also allows me to do a lot of service in OA. And the challenge there is how much service to give and what's the best way to do service. And for me, that's been what's the right service at the right time. And when I first started in the rooms, that meant, hey, maybe you could show up and be on time. Maybe, my first service could be being there a little bit early to greet newcomers. Maybe it's setting up chairs. Maybe it's just reading the steps and the traditions at the beginning of a meeting. What I really liked about my sponsor was that I felt like really from the beginning I could talk and share with my sponsor whatever my service issues were. And my sponsor often would suggest new service for me that I really hadn't considered for myself. And I remember the first meeting that I led the meeting, and it was such a scary concept that I was leading this meeting, and maybe I had been in the rooms for, 6 months or so. And I'd been to this meeting every week. It's not like it was a mystery to me what would happen during the meeting. But somebody said, here, you want to read the format? And I realized that day that 2 things. One, sometimes giving service was just reading. The second was that the people in the rooms that I was, this concept of being able to do the right service at the right time is something that I felt has guided me along with my sponsor's help as I've grown to do additional service in the rooms. My sponsor was the one who suggested that I go to intergroup initially, and that was really an eye-opening experience for me. There were people at intergroup that had, in many cases, years and years, in some cases decades worth of recovery and service in the context of that recovery, which were amazing for me to see. And then I had an intergroup chair suggest that I could do service at the Region 7 at that level. And what was amusing was the conversation with my sponsor about that. My sponsor wanting to make sure that I was devoting enough time to my step work as we went along, rather than just getting caught up in service at Region. So this concept of having this spiritual connection connected to sponsorship, both as a sponsor and as a sponsoree, in the context of the service, so that we can continue to carry the message, is really what I like to focus on. There were times when service came up at the Region 7 level where one of the officers in Region 7 suggested that I consider doing additional service beyond being a representative for my intergroup. And I remember talking about it with my sponsor and, thinking about it carefully and thinking, now is just not the right time. I'm not sure it was the right service, but it was definitely not the right time. And part of the reason why it wasn't the right service at the right time had to do with, in my mind, with the 12th tradition. And that, so anonymity, I'm not always sure it's a great word to describe all the things that it contains. I mean, certainly it's, a lot of it's about confidentiality, but anonymity on some level to me means a certain level of humility. And it's probably the thing I struggle with most as a character defect. And to me, the most important element of service is why am I doing the service? When I was first asked to do service for Region 7, I realized that one of the reasons I was really, really excited to do it was the sense that I wouldn't just be another bozo on the bus. I'd be leading the bus or, doing something more meaningful for the bus. And when I realized that and talked it over with my sponsor, I realized that was really the wrong reason to be doing service. And so I ultimately just declined to do that service. And then about a year or so later, I was listening to a speaker at Region 7, and another service position opened up. And I realized at that moment that I could do that service. It wasn't something I knew how to do right away, but it was something I could grow into and learn from the people who had done the service before. And that I wasn't doing the service because I wanted to be better or higher or more special than everybody else in the rooms. I wanted to do the service because I knew it needed to be done, and I thought I could do a good job with it. And that, to me, when I talked it over with my sponsor, was the biggest reason to do the service. And so I'm going to wrap it up with a question, which is about service, which is, can you remember a time when you asked your sponsor about what service would be appropriate for you, or asked your sponsor for advice about a new service position or task that arose from OA? With that, I will pass.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much for your share. I really appreciated it. Now is the time for open sharing. Our topic today, in this instance, we were talking about Tradition 12, and the principle of Tradition 12 is spirituality. This workshop is being recorded, so if you speak, it is considered implied consent to have your voice and your share recorded and posted. Please use only your first name or a fictitious name when you share. So we are now open for sharing.
Well, this is Marcy. If you don't mind me sharing again, I'll share, please.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Marcy. I'm a grateful, recovering, compulsive overeater. And right before I went into my 8-year relapse, I was giving a lot of service on a group level, and I wasn't doing it for the right reason. I was doing it to feel good about myself, not because of the need to be done and stuff. And I started to resent the group because they thanked everybody else for their service and never thanked me for doing it. And eventually it led to me stealing some literature off the table. And this past year I did make financial amends because of that. But now I don't try to do too much service that I can't handle. I do whatever I can, and it still does make me feel good, but I also do it because it needs to be done, and not everybody's willing to do service. Service can just be showing up at a meeting or setting up the room or putting out the literature or just even sharing at a meeting or welcoming newcomers, making phone calls, any little thing. So don't take for granted the people that do the little things at your meetings, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you for the reminder. Is there someone else who would like to share?
Hi, this is Pam in Seattle. May I share?
Sure.
Thank you. Wow, thank you for this workshop today, these presentations. I so appreciate them. And the thought of service for the right reasons at the right time, that's a wonderful concept. I know I've been I've been asked to take certain service positions, and I have believed I'm learning in recovery that just because I'm afraid of it doesn't mean that I'm not supposed to do it. So I have declined one kind of service position and took on another. But I feel like I was getting instructions from my higher power, an invitation from my higher power. to do this. And if I think that I'm doing this myself and that it has to look good because it's got to be an example of recovery, that's not the growth experience that service really offers. And I'm very grateful to be willing to take on some new higher level service positions, and in what feels like a humble knowing that I am going to need a lot of help, that I am not in charge. Whatever I'm doing, we're doing more than one person involved. I have to keep standing back and breathing, because I can get kind of freaked out easily, and I imagine I have a lot of company in that. So yeah, I just thank you for that concept of doing the right service at the right time. And the service position that I turned down really wasn't the right time, but this seems to be. So thanks. I'll pass with that.
Thank you, Pam. This is Cindy, and I'm going to add one little thing, and then we're going to close. And the reason I want to add it is because what you said really struck me. I've always given service. It's always been very important to my program. I was encouraged by my sponsors to do so. I've served at every level there is. And there was a point at which I thought I was pretty hot stuff because I was the convention chair and I did such a great job and woo-hoo-hoo. And shortly thereafter, I decided I didn't need to give any more service because I had done such a great job and there were a lot of other people that needed to. That led to a relapse. Oh, my. So when I came back from relapse and I humbled myself enough to admit my wrongs, and then I started to give service again. And one of the biggest things I learned about service is it's a way to help us grow spiritually. We grow spiritually by giving service. So I always try to encourage people to try it. If it doesn't work out, this is the one place you can say, sorry, I don't think this is meant for me. And you can step down gracefully, or, as the speaker suggested, you can just wait for the next opportunity. But don't wait for every bus to leave the station. There is more than enough service work in OA to go around. And learning how to get along with others is at that spiritual growth. That is what really, really has kept me in program and kept me abstinent and kept me desiring to continue to belong over the years. And so with that, I will pass. We're going to do the closing. The opinions expressed here today are those of individual OA members and do not represent OA as a whole. Thank you for attending our second Sunday workshop. This and the 11 other podcasts that were created from this series are available on the OA.org podcast page. We hope that the information in these recordings has helped in some way to bring more awareness to the traditions and concepts which guide us in our relationship with others, both inside and outside the Fellowship of Overeaters Anonymous. I will close this workshop with the Serenity Prayer, after which the meeting will be closed. Thank you all for coming today to the service in my recovery workshop. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. The courage to change the things I can.
And the wisdom.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
I will be done.